Well, hello, my name is Steve Dwinells, and I'm the director of the Instructional Design Center, which is part of eCampus here at Eastern Kentucky University. We have the privilege of working with a number of great faculty members. And the purpose of this podcast is for you to get to know some of these faculty members and learn a little bit more about what they do and their disciplines. Today we're talking to Dr. Ann Callahan. Dr. Ann Callahan is an associate professor and Master of Social Work program director and online coordinator at Eastern Kentucky University. She has a PhD from the University of Tennessee and a license in clinical social work. Dr. Callahan has over 20 years of experience as a social work practitioner, teacher, and researcher. Her research focused on spiritually sensitive social work in hospice, palliative, and long-term care. This includes the book Spirituality and Hospice Social Work, published by Columbia University Press. Welcome, Dr. Callahan, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Steve.
EKU is beginning a Master's in Social Work program this fall. And Dr. Callahan, would you just tell us a little bit about the program and what your expectations are of it?
This program is an opportunity for social work students and also non-degree seeking students to engage in interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary, whichever term you prefer, education. So essentially folks are going to be taking elective courses as part of certificate programs in mental health, in addictions intervention, child and family services, social advocacy and justice, and leadership and management. And so those are the most common areas we see social workers going into. We have also folks that are interested in other types of disciplines that can feed into the knowledge base that social workers draw from, like psychology, sociology, child and family, nursing. You know, there's lots of disciplines that help social workers do what they do. We draw from various knowledge bases across disciplines, and in the process of drawing from various disciplines, the knowledge base that they offer, we learn some of the skills and tools in these allied health profession courses, as an example, in order to better do our own jobs as social workers. We have many social work practice theories and research and skills that we employ, but we also are mindful of what other disciplines do and how other professions interact and engage with us and clients in serving various populations across settings. And so that's going to be the crux of our program, is preparing social workers, advanced social workers, to be able to handle high-level performance expectations, addressing social problems, huge problems in this world that we're tackling as a collective. No one can do anything about poverty alone. I mean, you need to have a collective effort of experts. And so we're preparing social workers to be amongst those experts, those leaders that are doing something about poverty. They're doing something about child welfare concerns, addictions issues. I mean, these are huge issues. And so I feel very confident that our program is going to be innovative. It's going to be accessible. It's going to be low cost for folks to be able to get in there and become advanced generalist social workers that are integrative, have that integrative piece where they're drawing from various disciplines to better do their job.
Well, that sounds like an exciting proposition. Do you expect a large turnout for your first class?
We do. Actually, we've had a phenomenal increase in numbers of BSW students. We have an online BSW program that's relatively new, and that's grown by leaps and bounds. And so we've had very positive response so far with the MSW program. Lots of inquiries, hundreds of inquiries, really.
Very good.
Applicants are coming in. So we're ready to go, and we're looking forward to, and of course, we're going to be accepting new applicants 3 times a year, up to 4 times a year. So we have entry points for students to join us at pretty much any time to start out and get into that program and start taking some of those initial courses to get on track and graduate relatively quickly.
Oh, very good, very good. I've got a question more on the practitioner side for you. As a social worker, social work professor and practitioner, how would you help a person cope with the many difficulties and challenges we've had in 2020? I mean, we've had a worldwide pandemic. We've had a significant economic downturn. We've had senseless killings. We've had mass protests that have turned into riots and looting. Any one of those is enough to cause a lot of anxiety in a person. As a human services worker, how do you help? What does a social worker do that could help?
That is a huge question. I mean, it really depends on the setting within which we're working. So most of my experience has primarily been in mental health. And so obviously during times of civil unrest, um, there's going to be a lot of anxiety. There's going to be potential depression. I mean, there's symptoms of depression, and then there's clinical depression, two different things. Anxiety, symptoms of anxiety, nervousness, and then anxiety disorder, panic disorder, agoraphobia. I mean, they're clinical symptoms that warrant professional help. But the everyday person can experience symptoms or feelings of anxiety or, feelings of depression. And that's natural. I mean, some of this is tumultuous to go through, real time. I mean, we're not talking history books, reading stories of the past. We're in it. We're creating history, and it's an amazing thing to be a part of this time. All the changes that we're going through, I think it's transformative for our society. It can be in a positive direction. I'm a firm believer in growth as being a positive thing. We can grow toward further development as a society that's better at being able to accommodate diverse needs and respect various diverse needs and create a system that uplifts and takes full advantage of people's diverse capacities in addition to needs. So, I mean, it's a thrilling time, or really, I mean, I know that there's a lot of anxiety, there's concern, there's worries, perhaps depression that can culminate to a clinical state necessitating professional help. But I think it's an exciting time as well, where we have many opportunities for growth, positive changes. And that's what social work is about, really trying to capitalize these moments of instability and ensure that new patterns are put into place, new systems are put into place that can really help us grow and move forward. And a lot of the work that I've done in the past as a clinician has entailed, I mentioned mental health, but crisis intervention has been a big part of my work as well. So crisis intervention, this is the essence of a crisis, being able, slightly unstable, but being able to capitalize on those moments of instability and embrace change. Because usually in moments of instability and periods of instability, we're the most malleable. We're uncomfortable. We want to get rid of this pain. We want to get rid. No one wants to be uncomfortable, and change entails discomfort. That's why we create, and that's why we change. That we need to have some degree of discomfort or some vision for something better or something more or something different that propels us into that next step. And we don't really change necessarily when we're in a comfortable state. So I think this can be a therapeutic change for individuals, finding, I don't know, for a larger society. That's the thing about social work. We intervene on a micro level, mental health care is an example, individual level, and a meso level, on a group level. So you have group interventions for social workers that could be coping skills groups that have moved onto a virtual platform. Clinical social work has moved on to a telehealth platform on a micro level, working individual counseling. You're seeing a lot more telehealth these days, group work, using Zoom technology. So, the nature of humans is to survive, so we figure out new ways to be able to get our needs met. And social workers are part of that process, facilitating that process. On a larger systemic level, we're going to need some policies, some policy changes. And social workers have been a part of that process and conversing with, legislators. They've been collecting up signatures for petitions. We've been, expert testimony in witnesses in state legislatures and federal level and court cases. Many more to come, most likely. But we provide lots of direct feedback for policies that are working and policies that aren't working. We provide direct feedback to legislators and lawmakers and judges and other people in authority. Sometimes social workers are those people in authority. They move on up into being elected into positions of authority. And so we're providing that feedback of what we're seeing out on the front lines. It's really an important role. So on three different levels, you're asking what can we do? I guess it kind of staggered, moved a little bit away from your original question about, how do we respond? What can we do as social workers to help in that response? It's really about growth and about forward movement and survival. And social workers help people in times like this identify opportunities that can lead to really ultimately the fullness of life, which is what we all want. We just want happiness, we want well-being, and it takes more work for some folks than others, depending on pre-existing conditions, depending on our circumstances. Some of those circumstances are things we have to change internally, but some of those changes entail working with larger groups of people, maybe within a family or a larger community context. So that's where we are, and social workers are, hopefully right there with everyday people, helping them through this.
Well, it's interesting because as I've thought about these incidences that have happened, the pandemic and the economic situation, I never thought of those things as good things. But your point about how change is necessary at times, that this is how it would happen. It's a very good point. It's a very good point, one that I would have never thought of. I'm the person that's been in the house for 4 months and don't get out, and a little afraid to get out because of what's out there. But in fact, it seems like I think you're right that overall there needs to be changes, and this is a way for those changes to occur.
Well, we're finding out what's working with our healthcare system in terms of our, some of the policies we have. We're finding out, I guess one of the things I've been most interested in is technology. And, which is one reason why I'm so passionate about online education with the master's program. And I've been thrilled to be a part of that in creating access to opportunities online for education. But with this pandemic, we have had opportunities to explore the limits of our current system for folks that have disabilities, in providing them access and allowing access to education, reading material, anything, healthcare, whatever you can access face-to-face is something that we have to convert to an online environment. And I think that allows people a direct experience of what it's like to have a disability. Not being able to leave your home because of a pandemic somewhat parallels the challenges people may face with a disability or even geographically, as an example of some type of a structural limitation to your ability to get out and fulfill your dreams. And so at least with the MSW program, creating access through a virtual portal, kind of like with access to telemed, access to mental health care, all these opportunities are accelerated. Access to these opportunities are accelerated because we have this new awareness of this pandemic that is limiting our freedom to move about. But there are many people that they've always had challenges in being able to move around freely, without question, without having difficulties because of the environment has been disabling, really, or because of geographic isolation or distance and lack of access to opportunities nearby. So I really appreciate I don't want to have this pandemic. I don't want the death, the fear, the anxiety, the life-changing events that are occurring with it. But I do appreciate the experience of increased empathy and the insights that we're gaining in this experience of recognizing what life is like when you have physical limitations, as one example, or other types of limitations, to being able to achieve your dreams and get out there and get what you want. Like I used to take for granted. Oh, I'm gonna run to the store. I'm gonna go pick up a dessert. Let's go out to eat. Let's go get my hair cut. We just don't. Now we take these things. We don't take them for granted. I used to take these things for granted, but so in a way, thankfully, we're helping. This is helping us gain a sense of sensitivity too, increased sensitivity to the limitations that come with any kind of limitation due to other factors, whether it's a health issue that keeps us home, or it's a geographic distance that limits our access to things. Or it could be, it could be lots of other types of barriers that we have in our society based on race, gender, sexual orientation. And those are the types of those are the challenges. Those are the types of barriers, systemic barriers that that we address as social workers. It's inherent to a person, but the negative aspects of diversity that are the consequences of a society that's not accepting. Those are the things that we tackle head on as social workers. So it's times like this make us gain that sense of sensitivity to being a diverse person, facing those types of limitations.
Very good, very good. How would, on a micro level, as a practitioner, what would you do to help someone who simply, lack of a better term, just can't take it anymore? They're at their wits' end as far as being in the house, being afraid to go out, can't go to the grocery store because they may get the COVID-19 virus. They watch what's on TV and they see all the cultural unrest, societal unrest, and they finally just said, I can't handle this anymore. As a social worker, what would you say to that person?
Well, I mean, how many times have they said, I can't handle this anymore? I mean, how many times have we as individuals said that? I mean, there's lots of times when we feel like we're just at our wit's end, and then all of a sudden, oh, I mean, it's like we're renewed. Something shifts inside. I don't know what it is internally it's like there's some self-preservation button that happens to click at some point that helps us maintain our sanity and our endurance to keep going on. I mean, I guess that would be the first thing is we can handle a lot. I mean, we can handle a lot. You may feel like you're at your wit's end. That's not the first time, and you've made it through. So thinking about what have you done that has paralleled this experience of stress. Maybe this is the most stressful experience you've had. I mean, granted, it is an anomalous thing to have a pandemic, but in terms of the level of stress, in terms of, and we've been snowed in before. Yes, I know we've had cabin fever. And we figure out, well, let's go make some popcorn or let's watch a movie. We find something to redirect our attention. So that's one of the things. I mean, it's a basic coping skill is redirecting your attention rather than feeding negative thoughts, ruminating on negative or fearful things. Stop reading the paper about COVID-19. Take a break. You're oversaturating yourself with that kind of negative information that's stimulating and feeding into that anxiety about it. Find some way to engage in self-care. I mean, not that so. I'd like to say that's so trite, and we always talk about take care of yourself, but it's true. I mean, really, deep breathing, meditation, prayer, yoga. I mean, it is amazing what self-care can do. I mean, especially when you're not used to doing it. I mean, some of the things about this pandemic is forcing us to slow down and think twice about, well, really, what matters? My family. I love my family. I don't spend enough time with my family. I'm working, so really it makes you think about what matters. What am I doing to take care of myself, maintaining my health, physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, the holistic thing. Having structure, maintaining a daily structure, even if you're in the house. Oh my goodness, how many journeys you can take when you read a book. When you're just like sitting and reading and, it's just a novel, watching a movie. I mean, there's so many things that are out-of-body experiences that you can have that you're not confined by four walls. But I think having a routine, having a schedule, taking a step back when you're feeling overwhelmed and thinking, what is this that I'm thinking that's escalating my anxious feelings? I mean, there is a connection between your thoughts and your feelings. What are you thinking about? How can you redirect your thoughts and focus on something else? Physically move. They talk about workspace at home. You can't get away from work. You're working all the time now. Find your workspace that's specific for your work. Don't do, like I know for myself, opening up my computer and looking at email is sort of a trigger for me. I get sucked into this vortex of working. So I need to not do that. I need to totally just shut it down at the end of the day and really be disciplined about that and not let it creep into my personal time, my family time, really, after dinner. I need to be not pulling up my computer again and checking emails. I really need to be disciplined about it and find other things to do. I decided to learn an instrument, so I'm going to be picking up my instrument in the evenings and plucking away, so it's something I've always wanted to do. It's been fantastic, and it's really been an unexpected stress reliever. So you hear about people picking up new hobbies. Try it. It's been, for me, it's been phenomenal. Doing some different things that I would normally be working 24/7. And I know I have an opportunity to, but it's not healthy. And so if nothing else, being disciplined and sticking with a routine, a schedule, and knowing about the importance of the holistic approach to self-care, and then really thinking about, retracking your steps and thinking about what's going on here when you start feeling overwhelmed. What have I been doing? What have I been thinking? What led to this anxiety? And shift that gear, to redirect your focus to something else, and know that you're not alone. I think people start feeling like they're trapped and there's only one. I'm the only one in isolation. No, you're not. We all are. You might see people out. Some people out with wearing masks. Some people not out wearing masks. People had different approaches, but at the end of the day, you need to do what's safe for you. And at least for me, that's staying at home, kind of doing what you're doing. But it gets back to self-care and how do you care for others?
Very good. Very good. Thank you. I want to shift gears here now, Dr. Callahan. You have a very interesting research aspect where you look at the spiritual dimension of therapeutic relationships in hospice social work. And I just think that's fascinating. Can you take a few minutes and explain to me and to the audience what that is all about and how you got interested in that?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Thank you for asking. I don't know about you. A lot of people, I'm gonna go ahead and out myself here, but I've had therapy before. I'll just admit it. I've had therapy. I probably still need it now, but but I'm okay. But yes, I've had therapy before, and in the past, when I've gone to this therapist, I really needed someone to talk with that understood me as a person from a spiritual standpoint. I'm a very spiritual person and religious person, by the way. But I needed someone that would understand that, and someone that I could talk with about those types of things. And she understood the language that I would use. And so that really made a difference to me. The person that I was seeing regularly actually was the same religious faith as I was at the time. I was raised Catholic, and at the time she's Catholic, and so it was really helpful to talk about methods of prayer and means of coping, and just how I understand why things are happening. Thinking about it from a theological standpoint. We didn't really get into theology. She's an LCSW, and but also a devout Catholic, and so it really helped having someone to talk about that type of thing. And again, it wasn't always necessarily theological conversation. Obviously, I have a priest that I could go to and have those kinds of conversations with, get into those details. But really, it was just like, I don't know, just a safe place really for me to talk about those kinds of things, those kinds of questions, and why would God do this to me? Or not that God would do, just kind of process with that, about those kinds of things. And so that made me think about what would happen to me what would have happened if I hadn't had that person that I could talk with about those kinds of things, that would understand me from that standpoint, a safe person. And so that got me interested in it. It really made me think about, because when I was going to graduate school, spirituality, religion, it really was sort of a taboo topic when it came to social work. Social work has gotten to, it's very scientific, it's very much evidence-based. And religion and spirituality was not really part of that paradigm. I mean, it was more of a mystical. Religion and spirituality is kind of like the opposite in a way of being positivistic, which is more of the typical quantitative research approach to data and data and collection and data analysis to evaluate efficacy of interventions. And so mystical, intuitive feelings, spiritual insights and inspiration, that really didn't factor into kind of like a scientific quantitative perspective. And so I can understand there being some hesitation to move in that direction within the social work field. But I have really, I know for myself, that's been a big part of what I have needed, someone that would understand that part of me. And I know nursing literature, there's been a lot of research in nursing literature talking about how spirituality has been part of the holistic approach to healthcare, especially in hospice. Cicely Saunders is the founder of the modern day hospice movement. Florence Nightingale is the founder of nursing. Both were very religious or spiritual, at least. I know that Florence Nightingale felt called by God to be a nurse. Cicely Saunders really believed in spiritual pain as being an element of the dying process. And so really I've looked to nursing leaders as more of, in terms of mentorship in this area. And then of course, Edward Kanda in social work, he had written a book several decades now ago, Kanda and Furman, Spiritual Diversity, where he talks about spirituality and how do we create a spiritually sensitive environment. In a workplace, what goes into a spiritually sensitive environment? Well, I would say in a hospice environment, that would mean a place where people can pray, or a chaplain present, an official that would be able to help you, or at least somebody sensitive like a social worker who knows that that individual cares about spirituality and would need some type of a spiritual leader in the community to come visit them, to help them make sense out of what's going on. And if they do have those questions about what does my life mean now that I have this terminal illness or life-limiting illness, or how could God do this to me, or should I, does suffering mean that I'm a better person because I can endure the suffering that God has given me to endure? These are, I'm not saying this is like what you should believe. I'm saying these might be some of the things that people are asking, but they would need someone to talk with about, to process through, and someone that's comfortable. And I know that when I first got my degree and my master's degree in social work, I wasn't really comfortable talking about those things because, again, when I was going to school back in the 90s, that was not really something we learned a whole lot about. Now, the book Kanda and Firma wrote about spiritual diversity, that one was, I think the first edition was published in the 90s, perhaps later in the 90s, like 98. So, I mean, it's still relatively new in social work. How do we address spirituality? And we have a lot of work to do. And so that's kind of part of my mission, is to contribute to that body of knowledge. And I think that my approach is a little bit different, though, in that I really believe that spirituality can be experienced through relationships. It's the idea of relational spirituality, that my life is made full by the relationships that are a part of it. And that includes my relationship with myself. And so to me, social workers can help. We're all about relationships, that we engage in the therapeutic relationship to help people improve themselves and to experience a sense of peace when they're struggling through whatever issue that they're facing in life. And so you can engage in whatever types of techniques. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's not spiritually related coping skill to help you deal with anxiety, but it's how do you treat your body? Do you have body image issues? Are you engaging in self-mutilation? That's not a really healthy or helpful relationship with yourself. That's not really uplifting yourself. I think that would require intervention to address an improved relationship with yourself. What about, so a lot of times you think about, relationships with other people more naturally, like marital couple relationships or relationships with your children or friends. How do you improve those relationships to add quality to your life? When you're facing the end of life, I think it's more likely for you to be asking those kinds of questions, kind of like a point in time when that's a crisis point in time, when you're questioning, what have I accomplished in my life now that my life is limited? I think that, we all have limited lives, but when you're facing, like, clinically the end of life, when you're in hospice care or you're diagnosed with a terminal illness, you're really thinking about those things. You're really asking those kinds of questions. And you need somebody that's prepared to not answer those questions, but to help you process through those kinds of questions. So you're thinking about the quality of your relationships, I think, as part of that process. Your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your other people around you, your loved ones, the quality of those relationships, the relationships that you've had with your larger space, your environment. For some people, they don't have a belief in God, but they very much get a lot out of being in nature. I love the water. I go to walk by water to help me feel a sense of peace. And I can't explain that peace. I don't know why it is. Water is just something that I need. I need to have a nature trail that gives me a sense of peace. Just being out amongst the flowers. I have a huge flower garden. I need that for my sense of peace. So that's, thinking about relationships with a larger, beyond the self, a larger environment. For some people, that's a relationship with God. And so in essence, relational spirituality manifested on the individual level within yourself, with other people, marital relationships, relationships with your family, friends, and then a larger environment, perhaps with God, if you have a belief in a higher power or, a religious belief, or it could be just with nature, outside of yourself, out in the world, on a trail, hiking. Those relationships are what add quality to life. And that's what, that awareness of that quality of life is that, that heightened awareness is what I would consider evidence of relational spirituality. And so social workers, that's what we do. We're about relationships. We work through the therapeutic relationship to help people experience the fullness of life. And that's an element of relational spirituality. That would be a relationship, one-on-one relationship with someone to help you gain a better sense of wholeness, that spiritual dimension of the holistic approach to healthcare, biopsychosocial spiritual well-being. So that's how I've approached it from a relational spirituality standpoint. And that's still, relatively new. We still have lots of work to do to test it out. And a lot of it is based on theory, looking at research from other disciplines, heavily relying upon nursing literature. And there's some work in the psychology literature looking at relational spirituality and how that idea informs quality of life, enhances quality of life.
Well, this brings me to another question, Dr. Callahan, and that is, you seem passionate about that kind of research. Where do you see yourself going with your research? Are you going to continue working in the spirituality, hospice type environment, or are you looking at any different aspects of social work?
That's a great question. Thank you, Steve, for asking that. So right now, especially with COVID, we've had a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, movement to telehealth, online type interventions. And so I'm really interested in how the online environment shapes that experience of spirituality. A lot of online interventions that relate to spiritual care, like you have chaplains all over the place in hospice. You have telehealth, other professions other than chaplains, social workers, different professionals, psychologists, medical doctors that are using telehealth as a way to intervene. A lot of times we talk, and please forgive me, these are going to be kind of some scattered random thoughts, it will seem like, but I'll try to weave them together. Some of this is a work in process. But in online education, we talk a lot about social presence. And how do you create a social presence? How do you create that relationship? How do you forge that relationship with a student when they're across the airwaves? Sometimes our conversations happen asynchronously, where we post a comment on a Blackboard discussion forum, or I record a lecture, or we have an interview and someone's watching it later. How do you create that connection with somebody? Maybe it's synchronistically, maybe it's asynchronistically. How do you ensure that people know that you're there for them? You respond quickly to their emails when they ask you questions. You in how you write back to them, you make it very specific to that person. You ensure that they know that you care about them, and how you write your comments and your feedback. So there are different strategies. Maybe that's not, but some of this, there is literature out there that talks about the importance of social presence in the online environment, and we have different ways of operationalizing that. And so those are just examples of how I try to do that, is let people know, hey, I'm here with you. We may not be in the same room, but I'm with you. I'm working with you. I want the best for you. And so that's the same for a therapeutic environment. Education is a type of an intervention, if you will. And social workers use educational interventions all the time. We educate people on coping skills, on new behaviors, to replace maladaptive ones or self-defeating ones. So educational interventions are integral to what we do as social workers. And I'm interested in looking at, how does spiritual care change, or spiritually sensitive care change, when you're using a virtual environment. So that's a really long, long introduction to getting to where I'm at right now. Most recently, I've been working with several priests in the delivery of virtual worship services. So I'm interested to know, well, how has that affected how has the virtual environment affected the experience of worship? Has it taken away from people's spiritual experience? Have they had a spiritual experience in a virtual environment? Part of my job as a social worker is to be a facilitator. And so in this case, I have basically engaged in congregational social work. I have helped create this opportunity for these priests to continue their ministry and provide, it's like a type of palliative care, to provide mostly older adults access to this worship experience. I have provided technical expertise, created tons of slides, integrated music, integrated church bells. I mean, we've done it all. It's pretty amazing, all virtually online, using PowerPoints, using Zoom. We've replicated this worship experience online. Now I'm interested in knowing more about, what has this experience been like for you? Why have you gone to now people have most recently had the chance to move to an in-person opportunity rather than just sticking with a virtual worship experience. So now I'm just really interested, what is it that got you into using the virtual service? Why haven't you used a virtual service? How has it affected your experience having a virtual service versus an in-person service? So this is getting to some of what is the nature of our virtual space? Can you create a spiritual space in a virtual space? What are the outcomes of that? And so that's, looking at the literature very quickly, looking at the COVID literature in terms of spiritual care, we're going to have to do more outcomes research and looking at the impact of these interventions that are online, the virtual interventions. We try to do that in terms of virtual education. We need to do more of that in terms of virtual therapeutic intervention, and educational intervention is a part of that. So, some of those components that I mentioned earlier about social presence in an online educational environment, I think that transfers into some of these other types of environments. Social presence of the priest, of the spiritual caregiver, I think that would have an impact on perceived quality of the spiritual experience of an intervention. I mean, I don't know. These are all research questions, but these are questions that I'm interested in looking at, and those are going to be some of my next steps. Kind of processing through, working as a collaborative with these priests, other people in this congregation. It's definitely been a multidisciplinary approach. So really processing through, thinking about how we've worked together to provide this intervention, if you will, and then looking at the outcomes of it.
Very good. Very good. Let me recommend to you Dr. Callahan's book, Spirituality and Hospice Social Work. Just on a personal note, we had hospice experience with my mother about a year before the book came out. So this was I was still dealing with some of the hospice type issues. And this book was fascinating. So let me encourage you to get a chance to read it, if you would. And Dr. Callahan, I look forward to your next book whenever that comes out. And I just appreciate your time today. And thank you for all your work and for your research. And thank you for what you do with EKU.
Thank you. Appreciate it.